Welcome back to Stellar Horizons campaign game playthrough, episode 42. It is the year 2132. Let's see here. I double checked in the last video. I had a question about the Russian rocket that they built over here in the asteroid belt to launch supplies. It was an LV-2, so we did that correctly. What else? I realized I'd forgotten that the Russians and the Americans actually have range 5, and it's a little late now, but I think a couple of turns ago when I was thinking about it, if the Americans had gone to build a base over here in Saturn, range 7, that would have supported, for range 5, a trip out to the Kuiper Belt, and for the Americans to get the Pluto mission. They will still set themselves up, I think, probably sending a ship with all the necessary supplies to Saturn at the end of this decade. What they really don't want is to have that extra base and CV support costs, because they're way over their limits in both already. And so they will throw that down in the first turn of the next decade and get the ship going. So they'll try for that. So I think with that, we're ready to do the builds. Starting with the Asians. Asians are expending a supply and a fuel to ready their last CV. They're also spending $16 billion at Earth, which is the rest of their money, and $2 billion for a telescope. So the supplies are going to go on their big ship. Now what they're actually going to do first, they could just take it to Mars, and that's great. They're going to come over here, they're going to split the difference and sell 8 of it, which is the limit, at the asteroid belt. That will make them 16 billion. So they'll get that money back. They'll still have 8 supplies remaining, and they can take that to Mars to support the terraforming. Russian builds out at Jupiter. They've actually built up a nice little set of resources here. They are doing an LV-1 and a simple orbiter, not very expensive. They can launch that over to Neptune. We're halfway through the decade at this point, and so with the travel times and everything, any robotic explorers that people start to send out now are likely to have very little impact. And both the Russians and the Asians are over their robotic support limit by a substantial amount, but we have seen those malfunction rolls happen, so that stuff gets depleted. All right, the Americans at their Jupiter base. This CV-5 is at their Jupiter base. They're decommissioning it, which they get half of these resources rounded up. They add to that these things, and that will buy them this CV-6. So they're converting that ship, upgrading it to the CV-6. And that is out. And that looks like the builds. The Americans have cash, but they're going to hold on to it for now. And we're ready to move into... So the movements, transfer box movements, so the Russians have come back to take another bite out of the South Americans. CV-4 arrives at Earth. Russians want to load that up with some resources and move them to Venus. Nothing there. We have the CV-7 arriving, so I think the Asians are ready to head to Jupiter. Of course, they'll rethinking it a little bit now, because they knew they definitely had an advantage a minute ago, or at least a slight advantage, or maybe not even a slight advantage, an even, but they felt like they just needed to push for it. Okay, so we're doing transfer box movements. sorry, let me not get off track. Flyby arrives, orbiter, orbiter, flyby. I did give some consideration to the Americans, so sending that flyby from the scattered disk out to Alpha Centauri. That's a distance of 30 between them, so it would take 15 years, and there's big points, in-game points for both the robotic and crewed vehicle exploration of Alpha Centauri. And you don't even have to get a depletion, you just have to do the exploration. So that's doable. The Americans are actually doing quite well on their physics tech. Let's just take a look. I kind of just did a quick, it's about 40 points right now, and they're only halfway through the decade. So they are, the next speed is 0.4, but then the next one is 0.2. 0.2 of 30 is what, 1/5 of 30 would be a 6. So that would be a 6-year journey from the scattered disk to Alpha Centauri. So I think they're not going to send this one, but if they can push forward and get the heliocentric speed 0.2, then next decade they would be ready to send a flyby out to Alpha Centauri, or an orbiter even, I guess. An orbiter would make sense because it's a high Explorer number. You can get all the, it's random what text you get. But sending an orbiter out to Alpha Centauri, I think would, and maybe a flyby both. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, or I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, I think that's all of the movements. Let's do the Asians. They're going to launch the telescope into Earth orbit on an LV-2. 92 rockets recovered, and the telescope is back in business. I'm going to kind of push them up again like that. All right, other Asian movements. We don't have anything here. This guy, we said, heading to the asteroid belt, and that's a 2-year journey. Where? Okay, so they've got that cargo, and that cargo, and I think they had dismantled their other one. So at this point, let's just take an assessment. They've got 14 plus 12 is 26, plus 4 is 30. If I'm reading my numbers right. I think they've got about 30 combat strength, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drones. And the Americans are looking at 15, 22, 29 combat strength, and 1, 5, 6, 7 drones. And what do we say over here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's a very even matchup. So it could go either way. It's not likely to be decisive, but it may change things up. So I think, and I hope I've been keeping things in frame. I'm mostly looking at the board and just holding the camera up. So yeah, the Asians are going to move, and is that, yeah, so 5, and that's 1, 2, 3. So the Americans are kind of meeting them in strength with 4 crewed vehicles, 4 to 5 to match the strength. So that's a 1-year journey. So we're going to have the Battle of Jupiter. Okay, what other Asian movement? I don't see it. Orbiter rover. That is pretty simple. Oh wait, it's not true. So we've got another CV here. Well, what's useful for that guy? I think all right, sorry, had an inadvertent pause there. We were trying to decide what to do with that CV4. I think sending it farther out is just going to potentially put it out of position in case we need it here in the center or back towards Earth. So I'm going to use its resource gathering capability over here in Vesta. Not a bad place to grab ore. And ore is always useful. So that is the Asian's turn. I was just thinking, what am I thinking about here? Yeah, so I'm looking at what the Asians have at the asteroid belt. They're going to mine some more. They've got these supplies and fuel. I'm going to let the Asians kind of change this up. So we're bringing 8 supplies to sell, and then we were going to take the other 8 to Mars. Mars has got 5, 6, 7. One more would get them 2 more terraformings this decade, and maybe we are happy with that in the middle of a war. So I was just thinking about changing up some of what, let's call it 10, and let's change that. Yeah, I don't really, we're going to change that up a little bit. We're going to bring some more fuel, more supplies. We'll do something like that. That's probably not exactly right, but going to just do a little bit of an audible there and change up the consist on the cargo. Okay, we'll call that good. That's the Asians' turn. Next up, the Russians. Let's launch their orbiter from Europa. 45. Rocket is recovered. And I guess, they can spend some of these resources on settlements. Jupiter settlements are worth good points. And the orbiter. So Jupiter, 5. Neptune, that's 6. Distance of 6. Halved to 3. It is an LB1, so it's just a 3 year. Okay, what other? We've got the Russians moving into orbit to loom over the South Americans. This guy is just coming into Earth orbit to buy resources, other Russian stuff. The answer is yes. Of course, they've got these guys, which I don't know what to do with. So with a range of 5 from Jupiter, gets you to 10, which is halfway between, that also sounds like a good setup, halfway between Neptune and Uranus. So there's nothing there. So there's nothing for them to explore. So they're going to sit at the base. Crude Vehicle 3, however, can do some resource mining. Well, there's ore, there's fuel, and there's supplies. So we've got choices. I think they'll go for some supplies. They'll do that. Actually, I guess they could go take, let's have them load up. We've got 7, 8 ore. Let's have them take 2 ore. They could even trade more if we wanted to. Why not? Let's make a little money. They're going to take 4 ore with them and move through. So from Europa, they come out here. I'm just being a little more explicit. Not that it matters because they're not even in the war. Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, and then they're going to come over and land at the Callisto base. And they can sell some ore, make some money. They can mine some more ore. Okay, I think that's going to be good for the Russians. I guess that is all of their movement. I feel like, yeah, the 3 ships there and the 3 ships there. Okay, they are done. Americans. Do the Americans have anything going? They're not launch. Actually, that's not true. They are going to launch. So, Redstone Base has been uncovered. It's not under blockade now, so they can launch 6 resources out to Jupiter. Jupiter's actually getting a little bit low on fuel. So they'll send 4 fuel and 2 supplies on an LV3 from Mars to Jupiter. 86th. So the rocket is recovered. And now it's time for the Russians to mass. Now I'm just kind of stacking them there for a second. This CV4 is going to move over here. They're going to continue to mine for ore. They're all in a fleet together. Now the question I have is, where do the Americans, they're not going to refuse combat. So I think sitting in the flyby box is the thing to do. I'm sure the engagement is probably guaranteed, and I think both sides want the fight. So yeah, they're just going to mass there. There is no other American movements. So that's done. Combat phase. We've got, I think, just the Russians. So I'm going to put those guys side by side. And we just simply roll 1 die and consult. An 8. An 8 on, well, that's an awesome result for a non-player faction rating. So 8, sorry, I'm not going to zoom in. Hopefully you can read that. So 6 resources, 1 damage. I think, although they're unlikely, doesn't matter. So they're going to put the damage on the CV4. And it needs to roll for a recall. 88, no recall. That earns the Russians a victory point. And we said 6 resources of their choice. And So with that knowledge, we're just going to make it all supplies. And they can go again next turn. Because that guy, 6 is the maximum that guy can carry 12, so regardless of the result, or irregardless, I'm not sure. So that is the combat. And that's working out. That's 3 victory points that the Russians have gotten, and they're going to get another one next turn. So that'll be 4. So that's equivalent to an exploration. Or I'm sorry, like one of these missions, plus they're getting resources out of it. Okay, other Russian movement. I'm sitting here looking at this CV4 that we just moved. Oh, because we just did the movement phase. That's why. I'm going to catch up here in a second. So exploration phase, or I'm sorry, combat phase is done. We're moving to exploration. We start with the Americans. Their telescope. Well, the Kuiper, look at me again, Kuiper Belt. Kuiper Belt location still has that nice 10% chance for life, which is, and at this point, there's signs of life. So the next one's like 3 biology points and either 1 or maybe even 2 victory points. So the Kuiper Belt is a really good target for trying to get a depletion. And since the Americans' telescope is awesome, they'll target the Kuiper Belt. They do have this orbiter coming in as well, so they're going to have more chances. Okay, so 3 is halved. So that's a 2, plus the telescope is effectively a 5, so a 7. And that's a success and a 90. Physics marker pull. Well, we're getting low on physics, but it's a 3, so that is the depletion the Americans were hoping for. Our political marker. 3 goes down to a 2. They pull a world card. They're unlikely to change it. It's volatile atmosphere, so that's not valid. And then the 10% life check, which was the other goal here. $13, close, but no cigar. Okay, that's that one done. Americans, I guess they had that orbiter there that's gone. So they've got a rover and a flyby still. Well, the rover is a 7 plus 7, 14. $93 and a 1, so they're getting 2 physics markers. There's 3 markers left, so they're likely to pull all of 3 of these remaining ones. That's a 3, so another depletion and a 2. So this is going to deplete. Let's go get a new marker. So let's see, there's their 3 and 2. 4 goes to a 3. The Americans earn another political marker. So far the Asians haven't earned any. So the Americans, when it comes to the next economic phase, depending on how this battle turns out, the Americans are going to have the advantage with political markers to make more attempts and continue to push this further into war. Let's see, we need to do 2 world cards because that has a spectrometer. But they are unlikely to change anything. Silicate rocks, M-class asteroid. Well, the M-class asteroid does not all apply, and silicate rocks is just less good for them. So they will not pick that. And the life check looks like 6%. $35, no life. And the final exploration for the Americans this turn. Flyby is a 6. That's a 3. That's a 4 up at Sedna. So they'll target Sedna. So that's 10 minus 1, 9. $92 and 7. Success. Physics marker is a 1. That's all the physics markers. Next up for exploration are the Russians. Let's go ahead and I'm sure we will be having to pause and total up the physics and return the chits to the cup here momentarily. Orbiter is a 3 plus 4 is a 7. I think I might have rolled for a 6 last time and I don't think it mattered, but 71 and 4. So that's a success, physics. So I'm going to pause and add everything up. Okay, yeah, so the Americans killed it on the physics. They got 43 points. The Russians had 16 and the Asians had 13. So now we're about to draw again for, or not draw again, just draw for the Russians. Oops. And the Russians' pull is a 5. So that's a political marker for the Russians. The 4 goes down to a 3. No world card, no life check. Russian telescope. Targeting, they're going to go for the deep space. So deep space is 3, plus their 3 is a 6. $94 and 9, no success, no malfunction. Next, Russian exploration, flyby, orbiter, just those 2. Okay. I think they'd like to get some engineering points. They're so far off, though, on getting anything, although I guess these are not very expensive. So they'll go for the engineering, which is here. So 4 plus 5, 9. That's a success, no malfunction. Let's go ahead and take care of the engine check for the flyby. 87, that's good too. So the engineering marker is a 1. And then the flyby moves out to the Kuiper Belt. It's only a 1-year journey, but they would like to take a little more time with it. So the question is, how much time? They're not going to get the rover bonus or the spectrometer bonus. So Pluto's probably their best target, because this is just a 2, and that's an orbiter bonus. So it's like a 4. I think they'll go to the 4 box. That'll give them 3 plus, yeah, four shots. Had pretty good numbers. Okay. And then the Russian orbiter is going to go for the Kuiper belt. So it's a 4 plus 4, 8. $10 and a 4%. So just a malfunction. Engineering marker was a 3. And that Russian orbiter is out. Okay, that's all of the Russians' explorations. Asians, they've got an orbiter. 2, so now, I'm sorry, 3 plus 3 is 6. 98 and 10, nothing happens. Telescope. They'll go for the deep space astronomy. 3 plus 3 is 6. $28 and a 3, so no malfunction. Success. Physics marker is a 3. So the first political marker for the Asians. The 6 is going to go down to a 5. There's no world card, but there is a 5% life check. $33. No sign of the Ronculans. That was the telescope. We're just scanning. Got a rover. Orbiter several years out, so the rover. The rover is a 6 plus 7. 13. Well, that looks pretty cocked to me on that one, but it's a 0%. So 0 and a 4. So a successful exploration, but not 2, because it was, right? Yeah, 6 plus 7, 13. So they got a 3%, so another malfunction. So physics, and then an engineering. Physics is a 1, engineering is a 2. And that rover comes off. And that is all of the Asians' explorations. All right, okay, remote mining. Well, the Russians aren't doing it, okay, because not yet. They're going to trade. So the Americans over here. Oh wait, you know what? I screwed that up last time. Or I just didn't pay attention to the fact that this guy should have moved because he's recalled. He's not. So he's got his full cargo capacity of 8, and he would have moved back to the base. So we'll take care of that. And that's more stuff for the Americans there. Okay, so the Americans have 2 CV4s here. So we'll just roll them one at a time. Mining for ore, the number is a 5. $73 and 1, that's 3 ore. 72 and 3, 3 minus 1 puts it down to 2, so that's 2 ore, so that's 5 ore total. That's a good haul. And there, oh, the Asians do have a remote mining over here at Vesta. Now here's a question for Andrew, maybe. Okay, the Russians are in a fleet. Neither vehicle is ready. And this gets kind of back to this concept, the conceptual piece that I and other players have had, where, and I've generally just ignored it, and I don't know, and I think you can ignore it here as well. So these guys were attacking the base. They're not at the location with the base, they're at this Mercury location. Now we know that they cannot explore and mine in the same pattern. Sorry, I'm having trouble stringing my words together. But that was in a different phase. So I would say that this crewed vehicle is absolutely eligible, and it could have been an exploration as well if this had a positive number. But that crewed vehicle, I would say, would be allowed to do resource mining, because they're not at a location with a base, they're not at the base, they're just blockading it, and they attacked it. So they could do the resource mining. The question is, do they want to and risk the recall? Because if he becomes recalled, he won't be able to do that. He won't, and when I say do that, participate in a combat or next turn. Well, so I'm going to say that yes, he could resource mine, and he's just going to choose not to this turn because he doesn't want to risk the recall. But I think that is a valid, it's my interpretation of the rules as written. Okay, so we're going to do the Asians. Their target number is a 7. No recall, they got a 10. -1 is still a 9, so just a single ore for that guy. Okay, that is the trade and exploration phase. I'm sorry, just the exploration phase. Now the trade and base construction phase. Well, I know we've got a trade or two, but it's probably just the one. The Russians are selling 4 ore to the Europeans. So that, which is their limit, that's going to get them $8 billion. And that is the trades. So base construction, not in initiative order, or I mean, we're not conducting it in initiative order or reverse initiative order. We're just looking. Americans still have a bunch of stuff here, so they'll try to send some more next turn. Freedom Base is not blockaded now either. They're just going to sit on all of this, I think. Or do they want to upgrade their small to a large? They're not going to worry about it right now. But perhaps they should. Let's just take a look at their ore situation. No, they've only got 4 ore. Nope, they've got 6, so they could. But they'd like to repair the ship with damage as well. So they'll hold off. They've got more ore. They've got 6 ore sitting there. So they'll wait. They're not in danger right now. Russians. Well, they will definitely spend 2 and 1 and 2 more ore. To build a settlement. It takes them to 6. And yeah, if they hold out for a couple more settlements, they've got 6 supplies over here. They need, so they can bring in, and they've got the crude vehicle here at Earth, which is ready to bring them something. So they can build a couple more settlements, get themselves to 8, and then start terraforming probably. And when they get to 8, yeah, they'll be able to do that. Then they can buy a bunch of supplies. Okay. Do they want to do anything at Jupiter? They've got enough for a couple of settlements, but that's it for now. So I think they'll just wait to closer to the end of the decade. Asians, not building anything at Europa, not building anything at the asteroid belt. I'll go ahead and do the 1 terraforming. So flip that to 5. And they're kind of on pause there. How many settlements do they have? 22. Okay. That's all of our base construction. That's the end of the turn. Moving on to 2136. Be right back with the builds. Okay, 2136 builds. And Asians are real simple. They have no cash right now, and they're not building anything. Of course, this is the turn. I know you guys have been looking forward to it. The Battle of Jupiter, our first big fleet engagement. The Russians build. They are spending 12 billion on Earth to load up the Gagarin with a bunch of resources to take to Venus. And once again, I'm just going to push them over here, and we're going to remember where that's all going. The Americans are going to spend these 3 resources at Jupiter to build an orbiter. They've got an LV2. They're spending, they've got this damaged crude vehicle, so they can repair the damage with an ore and ready it. I gave some consideration to decommissioning it and upgrading it to a CV5, but I think that they didn't feel like it's going to give them enough additional combat power. Right now, their assessment of the situation is that they've got in it sort of the upper hand. I mean, this military force, this could go either way. But the positioning, the Americans have 3 crude vehicles that can mine resources, and the Americans are able to secure a better location to do that than the Asians. So they've been able to generate more resources than the Asians. The Asians have a decent ore spot, but it's difficult for them to have access to these outer systems. And then the Americans also have a nice cash reserve. If they lose a ship or something, they can rebuild it using cash at Earth and reinforce. The Asians don't have that advantage right now, or that capability. So the Asians are cash poor. They had a big cash advantage, and they've spent it for Mars terraforming and to kind of build up to parity in military strength. So the Americans are happy with that, and they're hoping that this goes well and that they'll be able to push it to war next decade and bomb the crap out of the Asian base there in Jupiter. So we'll see how that goes. So that's all of our builds. Transfer box movement. None over there. To the one box. Enemy in sight. Saturn. Orbiter. 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 Flyby. Flyby. Okay. Movements. Well, let's see here. Asian movements. This guy's going to stay here in mine ore. This guy's in a one box. This guy wants to move. So he came out here for resources. What resources did he come for? Well, if the Asians want some cash, they can sell. Oh, they're about to sell, sorry. So they've already got that under control. They've got a decent amount of ore at Tara. They'll get more ore there. They're low on fuel and they're low on supplies. Well, there is a good fuel spot here, and I think there's a good. No, I guess there's not a. That's 4 supplies, 2, 2, and 2. So supplies not really available. I guess they're going for fuel. Grab some fuel first, and then we'll see what happens. Now, I mean, the Asians could try to break out now. They could move. Where would they want to move to? They don't need to move to their base. I think with the, well, that's an interesting idea. Okay, so if we're just looking at this situation here, what the Asians would want to go do is go attack these guys. So this is EO, right? So the Asians move out of the flyby box, and as they do so, they get engaged. So the Americans attempt to intercept the Asians leaving the flyby box. We're just going to lay all this out here. And we'll even line them up in size. Okay, so target number for interception is 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's an automatic interception, and both sides get to subtract 2 from their die roll. So we're going to do the die roll, and we're going to subtract 2 to see where we are on tactics points. Red die is the Asians, black die is the Americans. So this becomes pretty damn consequential. Okay, not a huge variance. But the Americans have a 3 tactics points advantage off the die rolls. but I guess the total quantity matters also. So both sides are subtracting. Maybe it doesn't matter. So it's going to be like a 1 and a 4. So again, but the other piece is earn your opponent's search roll +1 per full 7 of enemy size. So the Americans have what? 14 and 14, 28. So that's 3 more tactics points for the Asians. And these guys have 14 plus 11, 25, and 5 is 30. So that's an advantage to the Americans because that's that's just over 28, so 4 to the Americans. So it's going to be a net +1 from size. So the difference there was 3, and 1 more, 4. And their tech, they both get +2, which will cancel each other out. So the Americans are sitting on 4 tactics points for the coming combat. And our options: spend 1 to choose direct fire. I don't think they will because the Americans have the drone advantage and they also have bomber tech. 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they've got a 1 drone advantage. And 4 tactics points. Okay, spend 3 to avoid combat. They're not going to do that. Now they can spend 2 to increase damage inflicted or decrease damage received. But here's where saving the tactics points to spend 1 to select a target instead of your opponent. And they probably would want to do that at least a couple of times. So do they want... So the Americans' goal here is probably to take out a CV5 or something. The Asians are going to get to cancel, what do we say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They got 6 fighters, so that's going to cancel 6 damage inflicted. So let's look at this from the Americans' perspective. They've got how much combat strength? 15 plus 14 is 29. So on the 29 table, if they really want to get into the well, then they lose all of the fighters and drones. On direct fire, that's like 14 damage. Of course, I think that's reading here, 29, 14. Of course, there's this little overlap here. I don't know if we should just subtract 1 off of, so treat a 29 as if it's a 28. I think that's the right call. But if they go for direct fire combat, then the Americans are also going to be taking a crap ton of damage because the Asians have 10 plus 14 is 24, 30. So they're 1 point more. So that would be, direct fire would be quite bloody. But okay, so looking back at this table, we were saying, okay, we're in the kind of the 29, 30 range, right? Plus a die roll. So we're looking at kind of at a minimum 9, 10 hits, but then you're going to be subtracting a bunch. At least the Asians will be subtracting 6. So you might, 29, you might get as lucky as, so in the range of 9 to, or 10 to 14. 10 to 14 hits that the Americans are going to do with their die rolls. And then subtract 6. So now you're down to 4 to 8. All right, the Americans are going to use one drone as a bomber. They'll use 2 drones as a bomber. The Americans are going to use 2 drones as a bomber. The other 5 will cancel damage. And they will do two tactics points to increase damage. So we said 2 bombers, so they're going to get +3 damage. 2 from bombers, 1 from the 2 tactics points, and they'll reserve 2 tactics points to for assigning damage. And the Asians don't really have any decisions here. All of their drones get used as fighters, which decrease damage. Oh, let's see here. Add to your combat value any tech modifiers and +1 for each unit in the opposing fleet after the first. So another +3 and +4. So that's another +1. Well, and we're just going to advantage for the Americans, but we'll go ahead and... Okay, so let's see if we can hold all that in our head. 2 bombers, 5 fighters versus 6 fighters, 2 tactics points to add damage. So the Americans roll. Probably going to end up, I think I'll so we're going to say 6 fighters and 5 fighters, 2 bombers, +1 damage for tactics, 2 tactics remaining. And we said their strength is 30 plus 3 for the enemy CVs past the first. And I also forgot, it's going to be a little deadlier because they both have +5 in the physics tree for their attack roll. +1d10. And these guys, I think we said 15, 14, 29 plus 4 plus 5 plus a d10. Okay, so let's roll it. Again, red dice, Asians, black die, Americans. Okay, Americans came out ahead there too. So that's a +3 and +8. So let's see what that looks like. $38, $41, and 29 and 9 is 38 plus 8, 46. So 41 over here on this table amounts to 15 hits. And 46 translates to 18 hits. Okay, and of those 15 hits, 5 are canceled. So now we're down to 10 hits. And of these 18 hits, 6 are canceled by the fighters. That's 12 hits. But the Americans also had 2 bombers into things. That brings that back up to 13 hits. So, nope. Oh boy. I probably just did that wrong. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Let's redo this. think I was subtracting and adding. Okay, so the original numbers. So the Asians inflicted 18. The Americans inflicted, no, 41. I'm sorry. The Asians inflicted 15 hits. Inflicted. Okay. The Americans inflicted, they rolled a 46, so they inflicted 18. Now the Americans are adding 3 to that and then subtracting the 6 fighters. So maybe I did it right. So the Americans are inflicting 15 hits, right? And the Asians are inflicting 15 hits. And then the 5 bombers, so they're just, inflicting 10 hits. I think I started doing that number right. So the Americans did a 5-hit advantage. I think both sides are going to lose a ship here. And the Asians may lose 2. Okay. I'll just stick that there. Now, and of course, the Asians did have the option to surrender. I guess once the interception roll, at that point, the Asians could have said, "Okay, that's no good for us," and they would have been able to surrender, which would have meant that they would lose a political marker. They would have flipped all their ships. But they didn't want to do that because they could have still come out a little better on the direct fire roll, or the combat table roll. It's not, in this case it is not direct fire, but strike combat. So on the resolving piece, inflicting the damage, okay. Okay, first hit resolved on the side that initiated the search, so that would be the Americans. 1 hit at a time, direct fire, the side receiving damage picks the first target. So that would be the Americans. So the Americans take the damage first, and do I even? I'm gonna need all the damage markers. Get them in a cup. Okay, let's see here. So, what's the best way? Well, the Americans, they don't want to lose anything. But again, they're going to take 10 hits, and they're going to spread it around as much as they can. So, Americans go first, take 1 on a CV8. Now the Asians do the same thing. Oh, am I doing this right? So we're inflicting it. We're just doing the Americans. Is that right? Yeah, so we're just doing the Americans. So we're going to take 10 damage on the Americans. That's how this goes. Sorry for being a little slow here. Okay, the Asians then come along and they say, well, we're going to try to kill one of these CV6s. They're only going to get to pick 5 though, so they know that they're not going, they're only going to get to pick 5 hits, the Asians are. So they are recognizing that they're not going to be able to kill anything. And the Americans come along. So yeah, now we can see how this is going to play out. So the Asians say, okay. I'm just wondering, does it make sense to switch it up? I mean, the Americans would get to continuously respond and adjust. I don't see any way for the best the Asians can do. You know, if they get 5 damage on this guy, it's not going to kill it, but it renders it combat ineffective. I don't think it's going to matter. There's going to be so much damage that nobody's going to want to fight, probably. But that's not true. So let's think about this a little more. The Asians were moving, and after the interception, I'm going to have to look here. Yeah, after interception combats are resolved, remaining ships in the fleets can complete their move or choose to cancel the move and even make another different move if so desired. Ooh, which could result in another interception attempt. Is that... that's an interesting point. I could certainly see, so if the Americans, they were beginning to move from the flyby box to Callisto and they got intercepted. This battle is not going to go well for the Asians. So they could stop and make another move, like back to the asteroid belt. So the question is, which could result in another interception attempt by the same fleet, or does that mean just... I think it does. That's a question for Andrew. Okay, let's get back to the... so now thinking from that perspective, the Asians may lose this initial battle, but is there something they can do to set themselves up a little better? Of course, they would like to have everything at least a little damaged so that there's a chance that it gets recalled. Okay. So let's see, your odd ones were the Americans. So this is an Asian choice. Asians say, let's do another one on this one. Americans now come back. They're going to pick one here. Asians pick this CV8. Americans are going to pick this CV8. Asians are going to pick this one. 6, 7, 8. Americans pick on odd. Americans are going to pick this one. I'm also looking at like effects. I think every 2 damage to a ship reduces its available drones. That's in the other rule book. Just checking damage. Each 2 full points of damage on a CV reduces its drones by 1. So this guy's already had all of its drones reduced. So we've done 4, 7, 8, 9. So this is the last one. It's an Asian choice. They'll pick this guy. So that is the way the damage stacks up. There. Okay, now we do damage on the Asians. The side receiving the damage gets to pick first. So now the Asians want to be careful because they figure, okay, they're going to lose a ship. They're going to take 15 damage. Also, let's take a look here. So actually, the Americans are going to get 7 picks. So the Americans can kill one of the big ones. And there's victory points. So 4 victory points for a CV7 or larger. So size makes a difference. 3 for a 6, 4 for a 7 or larger. And if the Americans are going to get to... The problem with going after the 7 for the Americans is right now their damage is all spread out. And if they get a recall on some of this stuff, if the Asians could come out more combat effective. But I think the Americans are going to assume that they're not going to get recalled, and they're going to take out the 7. And the Asians are going to get to pick 8 hits. So the Asians start off here. The Americans are going to pick this one. The Asians are going to go here. The Americans are going to go there. Now the Asians will pick here. The Americans will pick here. Asians need to be careful not to set it up so that the Americans can get more than one. So let's see, we're 3, 6, odd ones are Asians. They're going to go 1 there. Americans are going to go 1 here. I guess the Asians are, thinking they should probably spread it around a little. 1 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's just go ahead and get 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we've got 15 singles here. And we'll even line them up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, so the 9th. So that's American, Asian, American, Asian, American, Asian. Okay, so the Americans have 3 more damage to apply. and it's their go. So yeah, so they're going to go ahead and just focus in on the 7. Asians go there, Americans go there. Asians are going to go here. Americans are going to kill that one. And the Asians, this one's drone is already gone. Every damage is a reduction in combat factor. If they go here, they're going to lose a drone. Okay, so that's the way that's working out. Okay. I think we have correctly and successfully resolved that. So now we're going to give victory points, which is going to be 4 points to the Americans. This guy was destroyed. Three to 1. Get rid of those extras. Now we need to roll for recalls. So lots of rolls. I'm just going to go left to right, top to bottom. So Asian, first one, CV5, no. The Chakra, second CV5, 60, no. The Delhi needs to roll twice. 23, no. 59, no. This guy's out. And the Vikrant, 4 rolls. 86, 57, and 11. I think that was the third roll. That's a recall. So this guy flips, and the Asians get a biology marker. It's a 2. Okay, so the Asians are left with those guys and 4 damage on them. Americans, the Polaris, 1 roll, 25, it's okay. The Atlantis, 1 roll, 73, the Constitution, 4 rolls, a 7, it flips. That's going to earn the Americans a biology marker. A 2. Okay, so we don't need to roll for this one anymore. The Intrepid, 4 rolls. 41, 55, 14. Another flip. Okay. And that's 2. So, looking at the situation, the remaining combat force here is 2 6s with 2 drones. It's 12. And the Asians are sitting on 5, 5, and 2. So also 12. And 2, 3 drones. The Asians have 4 plus 4 plus 4, 12 hits remaining. And these guys have 10 hits remaining. Well, from that standpoint, that's tricky. So the Asians have lost this battle. Do they, if they were to stop the movement and try to retreat, the Americans would definitely let them do that. But they could also just continue on and go engage the American CV-4s over here at EO. Is that worth doing? I think the answer is yes, with the caveat. So then the Asians will be able to engage those guys. The Americans, the CV-6s, American CV-6s could move over here, and we could have another contested battle at EO. And I guess they'll do that. So yeah, so here's an interesting, and I'm just wondering now, okay, so we've got this move, this was the situation, we tried to move. Can this fleet break up now? Can I just move with those guys to EO and let this one make another different move now that it's flipped? Certainly. And if that's the case, then can these guys, make an interception attempt on him? So I'm not sure what the right answer is. I'm going to pause for a second to see if I can't puzzle something out from any of the rules. Okay. Yeah. I am going to assume that it's sort of you can continue on with the movement. I guess I'm going to allow I guess my biggest question is, can this one break out and move off on its own? And in doing so, is it subject to another interception attempt? And I think the answer, I'm not sure if it's allowed for this one by itself to stop the movement, or if everybody would have to stop the movement. I don't know. But if it could stop its movement, these guys move on to EO. This one, I think, would definitely be subject to interception because of the situation being an embargo. If they do intercept it, then it can just surrender, and the effect would be for the Asians to give that political marker to the Americans. I think you can also just move along with them, and then the question is, they're moving as a fleet right now. When we arrive at EO, it would need to kind of break off and be in a separate fleet, and I guess that's also allowed, but I'm not exactly sure, because we want a combat fleet and then we want the separate ships there. So I think we're going to say And I'm just going to leave all these guys here, actually, with their damage, because moving that all around on the board is going to be a mess. And I'll use a base marker for both the Americans and the Asians. Okay, so the American fleet, and I'll have them upside down so that we don't forget. So the Asian fleet is going to continue on to EO and be here. But then the one reserved ship is going to be in a separate, it'll break off. And I guess that's how we're going to resolve that. Other Asian movement. I don't think so. Hopefully we did all of it. Gosh, we spent a lot of time on all that. So this guy's, yeah, we moved him, and those things are staying, so I think we're probably fine. Okay, next up, Russians. Well, the Russians are going to stay there. This CV4 is headed to Venus, and he's got that cargo. Other Russians. The Russian here is just moving away from the base. Excuse me. Moving away from the base so that it can do some resource mining. And those Russian CVs are going to stay there. And are the Russians launching anything? I was considering, and I think I will still do it. The Russians are going to launch one fuel back to the asteroid belt on an LV-1. Let's roll those dice. $85. That's fine. I am hoping that I pulled the second biology chit for the American CVs. They got recalled or reserved. Okay. Other American movement. They have an orbiter. So we need to do an engine check. 72. It's at the Kuiper Belt. Those Americans now, if they try to move, then they'll be subject to interception by those three guys. So if they stay there, they know they're going to get chased down. So now the Americans have to make a choice. Do they, yeah, so I think Americans are going to send their combat ships, because this will be terrible. So they're going to send their combat ships, and I guess we'll break these up. And we'll move them over here. And then these American ships are going to move back to the base. And this may have been a mistake, because the CV-8s, that was what I was trying to figure out, and I didn't spend enough time thinking about it. Of course, the good thing is the Americans don't have very much ore here. They've only got 3 ore. But they can repair 3 damage off those 2 ships, and they have enough supplies and fuel to ready them. So those ships can get put back in commission, and depending on how this turns out, the Asian fleet we'll probably get attacked again. Oh well. That's why we're all playing this. I had that thought. You know, if the Asians push the issue here, are they risking the situation? And I was thinking that they would have one more turn, but that's not true. Okay, this Asian fleet is at EO. What else have we got for the Americans? Well, I don't think there's anything they've got though. They've got this CV3. Does it make sense to move it somewhere right now? I'm contemplating moving it to Europa, as crazy as that sounds. What's the situation at Electra? They have very little resources here. It's not under blockade at this moment, so they could send more. Problem is, of course, the Asians don't have any money, and they have no rockets, so there's no moving resources around to help this situation out. They're going to have to go back to the asteroid belt to repair damage. Okay, so that may have been a critical mistake for the Asians, but we're going to go ahead and let them make it. Yeah, so this CV3, gosh, it seemed really ballsy to move it over here to Europa to mine supplies. I think they'll hold on, yeah. I mean, as the Americans, they're just going to keep that guy safe at the base this turn. Okay, that's all of the movement phase. Just double checking. Yeah. Okay. Next up, combat phase. Well, the Americans get to go first. Does it matter? Do they want to engage in combat? Or do they want... And I think the Americans don't want to actively engage in combat if they don't have to. So they won't search for the Asians. Or do they? Because do the Asians go, oh crap, and do the Americans feel like they've, I don't know. The die rolls can be a little swingy, and so it's hard to know how the results of combat. I'm just sitting here contemplating. Okay. Yeah, the Americans are like, no, we're not going to do that. And I think the Asians will. So that's, the Asians are going to engage. So let's move these back over here. And again, this guy is actually, now that's interesting. So if that guy is off on his own, then the Asians absolutely instead will try to engage that one and force it to surrender. So that's what the Americans are going to do. So two CV6s are searching for the CV whatever. I think it's a 7. So That search roll starts off as a 4. Although he's reserved, yeah, he doesn't have his 1 drone. Okay, so it's a 4. It goes up to a 5 because there's an extra ship. And then the Americans get to subtract 1 from their die roll because they have 2 drones available. So this is this interception roll by the Americans. So we're stepping back to the Americans. Okay, Asians are red, Americans are black. And a 10 and a 9. So the Americans are not successful with the search, because even with the Americans subtracting 1, that's an 8, and it needed to be a 5 or less. So there is no, the Americans were not able to find that ship. Okay, next up the Asians, and they're actually, well, that's interesting. If the Americans did that, I guess you're able to do, and I guess technically they're in a fleet, so the target number would have been 5, 6, 7, but with that die roll, because if the Americans wanted, they would need to be in a fleet with these guys when they arrived at EO in order to protect those guys. So yeah, that would have been the roll, and the roll would have been 7 or less, but still the 9-10 roll means that there was no interception. So that's the American fleet. And so now the Asians search for them, and the target number is a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The Americans still get to subtract 1. And the Americans get the advantage again. So the Americans 6, so there's a difference, tactics points difference there of 3. And the Americans, if they want, well, the question is, let's figure out the rest of the tactics points, because it starts off at 3, but once we include the CV size, so the Asians are going to give the Americans 10, 16, 2 points. That brings it up to 5 tactics points for the American, and then we'll subtract off whatever this is. And that's 10 and 10, subtracting 2. So yeah, up to 5 and then down by 2, so back to 3 tactics points. Well, the Americans can spend the 3 tactics points to avoid combat. And I think they will, because in this situation, they're going to be able to get their CV-8s back in the game here in a second. And they are thinking that that's the better play. Hold off. So that's what the Americans are going to do. They're going to avoid combat. And all of this stuff is at EO right now. And this guy is technically in a separate. Does he need to be in a separate fleet? I'd have to. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be a fleet of unreserved CVs. Yeah. The fleet must be composed solely of unreserved CVs and have at least 1 ship with an attack value or strike value. Okay. So. Yeah, that guy has to be by himself. So yeah, the Asians are in trouble. Okay, that's the combat phase. And the Americans have held off the Asians from taking advantage of that situation. Into exploration, starting with the Americans. They have a telescope. Telescope is a 5, and they will target, they'll leave this to the orbiter, I guess. They'll target the deep space astronomy. So that's a 3 plus 5 is 8. They got the 8, they also get a 3%. So physics, and then in engineering, and the telescope is out. 2 for physics. Engineering is a 1. And the American telescope deorbits. Okay, other explorations. American orbiter, rover, and a flyby. So the orbiter at the Kuiper Belt is a 4 plus 4 is 8. $28 and a 7, so a success. Engineering marker pole. It's a 2. I said engineering, I meant physics. Rover is a 7 plus 6. 13. Ooh. Did that rover malfunction? I sort of feel like it did. That's going to be something I need to put a pin in that. Anyway, 52 is not a malfunction this time, so I'll have to remember to go back and check last turn, check the tape, and that is a 3. So they're getting 2 physics markers. And of course one of them's a 3, so it just starts to make things more complex for rewinding, and another 3. So they got 2 3s. That's still only a single depletion. So I'll just kind of stack this stuff up together to help me remember. So I put a political marker on those 2 3s. Oh, we forgot to launch the orbiter too. Three goes down to a 2. 2 world card pulls. Chasms and Maria. They both apply. I see rocky dwarf planets, so both of them could apply. The Maria gives an actual +4 to the rover. I'll go for it. They are not anticipating coming out here and building a base and doing resource mining, so they'll just take the bonus for the exploration. And the world life check 6%. $34. Okay, so this orbiter, let's step back and take care of that. So that was getting launched on an LV-2 from Jupiter, headed to Neptune. 79, the rocket is fine. On an LV-2, Jupiter to Neptune, that's 6, 3 years, -1 for an LV-2, so in the 2 box. Okay. Yeah, the Asians have really stepped in it. explorations. We did the orbiter, we did the rover, we need to do the flyby. It's a 6. They'll pick, that one up there is a 4, and that's a 3. So they'll go for, I'm just trying to decide if they want to try to change out that world card at Eris, or do they care? They'll stick with Sedna. So they're going to take the sure thing. 10 is an automatic malfunction check. 64, and then technically an engine check. 22. Okay. They're getting a physics marker for Sedna. Which is a 2. And then they're going to just decommission that sucker. That's all of the Americans' explorations. Next up, the Russians. They've got their orbiter. 3 plus 3 is 6. (35 and 10). Nothing happens. Telescope to deep space is a 3 plus 3 is 6. 62 and 9. Nothing happens. Other Russian explorations? No. Just the flyby. Flyby is a 4. They target Pluto, that's a 5. So 9 minus 3, 6. (35 and 10). Nothing happens. That's all of the Russians' explorations. Next up, the Asians. They've got their orbiter, which is 336. 46 and 9. Nothing happens. Asian telescope to deep space, also a 6. 56 and 3. So physics marker. Is a 1. Other Asian explorations, that's mining, orbiter. It looks like that's all they've got. Okay, resource mining. We said yes. So again, oh, you know what we forgot in the combat phase? We stepped right over it. Let's go back and take care of the Russians. Combat here with the South Americans. So that's just a single die roll, and we look at the table. A 1. That's the bad result. So that's 1 resource captured and 4 damage. So for 4 damage and 1 resource. Well, the 1 resource is going to be a supply. And I think they'll put all 4 damage on the CV6. They still earn a victory point, though. I'm just switching out some of these. Seem to not have a lot of 1s out. So we said 1 for the Russians. And we need to make 4 recall rolls for that Russian CV. 70, 51, 60, and 25. No recall. Okay, now I think we are swinging back to Russian explorations. No, we did Russians and we did everybody's explorations. We're doing resource mining. So at this point, though, I think because there's not going to be a combat next turn, we're going to say that that Russian guy is going to mine for ore. At a 6. An 8, -1 is 7, so a single ore, and an 11 is a recall. So 1 ore. He's going to flip over. He's going to get a biology marker, which is just a 1. And that is that. Other resource mining. And I've done a little bit of out of order because the Americans, they can still do their resource mining here at EO. So they have 2 CV4s. Target number for ore there is a 5. 6 -5 and a 43, so that's 2 ore. Next one, 22. That's not a recall. 7 though is just a single ore, even with the -1. So that is 3 ore. We'll swap that out for 2 2s. So no recalls there. Is there other Asians are doing it there? Up, and the Russians have one up there. So I'm just kind of moving down the board, not doing it in player order here. So this guy is a 7. $38 and 10 -1 9, still just a single ore. That's 3 times now that the Asians have really whiffed on the resource mining there. The Russians, they want supplies. That's an 8. Two -1 gets them 3, but that's also a 15. That's a recall. And so we said 3 supplies. They're going to flip over and earn a biology. And the biology marker is a 2. And the Asians have this one. They're going after fuel, which is a 9. $73, a 10, but they do get to subtract 1 to bring it back down to 9, so they get 2 fuel and no recall. Now I think we're done with the resource mining. Okay, trade and base construction. Are there any trades? I don't believe so. We've got those things here. The Russians are waiting on that one for a couple more turns. So I think we're all good on trades. Base construction. Nothing going on here, and I'm going to go ahead and let them do it, because the Americans were going to launch resources from Mars. I'm pretty sure they were well, I know they were going to do it. I'm pretty sure we didn't do it. Yeah, we didn't do it. And we'll go ahead and let them. It's not going to make much of a difference. I just, because they've got plenty of fuel and supplies. Ore is what they need. So they were going to send 6, and they were going to make it 2 and 2. Or 4 and 2. So those 6 resources, let's handle that rocket launch. A 19. So the rocket is not recovered, but those resources make it out to Jupiter. Okay. And now back to our regularly scheduled base construction. And there's nothing here, nothing there. Asians also not building anything. Okay. That looks like the end of the turn. So yeah, the Asians have really stepped in it. They've got these ships at EO, and so it's kind of an even combat situation, but the Americans are about to bring those CV-8s back up. These guys each have 4 damage, and the Americans can only afford to repair 3 total. But so do they repair 3 damage on 1 and send it back in? Do they do 2 and 1 and send them both? I think that's how they'll do it. I think they'll repair 2 and repair 1 and just bring as much combat strength as they can to this situation. So that was a big full turn. First battle of Jupiter, and some missed interceptions, or well, 1 missed interception and an avoid combat at EO. So next turn is going to be another big one. Hopefully the Asians will get a little bit luckier and can break out without losing any more ships. So thanks for watching. Talk to you later.